Eli, what's up, man? Thanks for joining me on the podcast today.
Hey, thanks for having me, brother. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. You got a good name, so that's a mark in your favor. That's actually my son's name is Elijah. So
There you go, man.
it,
My
it's a
mom, uh, my mom gave me and my brothers all biblical names: Zachary, Elijah, and Gabriel, man.
oh,
So,
is that right? Awesome,
right,
awesome.
yeah,
Well, hey, I know you're running for Congress. It's always fascinating to talk with somebody who actually wants to step into that arena. Quite honestly, I can see the appeal a bit, but also I see some of the negativity or the downsides of it, and I'm always very curious what compels somebody to go that route.
yeah. Well, I can't say that I saw the appeal. I would say I saw the need.
Mm.
This isn't something that I ever really wanted to do or I enjoy doing that much, but I do believe we're at a pretty critical time in this country's history right now, and wanted to, instead of continue to complain about it, try and do something about it. And so that's led me here.
How much do you think one person in Congress can make a difference? I mean, I'm trying to ask that respectfully. Like, I'm not asking that tongue in cheek. I'm genuinely
Yeah,
asking what one person can do in this position when it seems to me that the powers that be are going to continue to control regardless of who's elected here or there.
right. And that's a very fair question. When you look at the size of Congress, it's 435 people, right? And then you look at how many are in the Senate, that's another 100. And then obviously you have the executive branch as well. And so, um, there is some wisdom to asking that question. How much can you actually do when there's, you know, over 500 people that have to all kind of be on the same page to get anything done. But I would also say, just to give you an idea right now, Ryan, Nancy Pelosi right now has a +5 majority on Capitol Hill. She only has power by 5 people. So let's say, you're a part of flipping that back, away from her control, taking one of those 5 seats away, from the other side. You can stop a lot of the agenda that, in my opinion, right now is destroying this country. And so, and if it wasn't important, and if people, the power players of this world, not only our country, but the globe, didn't understand the importance of it, you wouldn't see millions of dollars pour into each and every one of these races. And so, to your point, it is tough to get something done just as one congressman, but many of us have seen in business and in our families and on the battlefield that, fear is contagious, but so is courage. And sometimes things are going a certain way because nobody's willing to step up and be a voice of courage and hold others accountable. And that business as usual just continues. And so, I don't know how much I'll be able to affect change. I'm not the type of guy that will come in and act like a lot of candidates who will tell you, "Oh, I'm gonna shore up the border and I'm gonna get this economy back in shape." And they make a bunch of promises that there's no way they could ever keep. But what I will do is, I will hold to my principles, and I will hold, to the America First agenda, and use my voice and my platform and my vote, um, in that manner. And so that's all I can do. But as a dad, Ryan, as somebody that has little girls, I've got a 15-year-old now and an 11-year-old. I want to do everything I can to make sure that they grow up with the same level of freedom and opportunity that you and I did. And if I can't look them in the face in 10 or 15 years and say, "Hey, your dad tried," to me, that's unsat. That is just unsat. And it's not a life that I'm willing. It's not a life that I'm willing to live. And, it's interesting because your podcast is called The Order of Men, right? The Order of Man, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that's what real men do. I think real men are willing to sacrifice for their families and do stuff often that they don't even want to do because for the greater good. And so for me, this is a perfect example of doing a bunch of stuff that I don't want to do, that I don't like doing. But I know that there's a possibility affecting some of the change that I want to see for the future of my kids and for future generations.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. One of the biggest concerns I've had is that it seems to me, and I'm very interested to see what you think, that when the liberal side of the aisle is in power, they do a phenomenal job playing offense. Like forget about the policy, but they do a great job playing offense. And when they're not in power, they do a great job playing defense and even offense when they're not in power. The part that I take issue with is that when conservatives are not in power, they do really, really well with the offense. And then when they get into power, all they do is play defense. It's like, what in the world is going on here? Like when conservatives have power, they don't wield that power correctly or effectively. I'm curious if you believe that, or you think that, or you see it differently.
No, I absolutely believe that. And I agree with it. And I think that I could be wrong, but I think the way I'm seeing things play out, I think that you're going to see more of the same. And what do I mean by that? Well, right now, I believe that there's kind of a schism or a fraction in the Republican Party. I think you have America First candidates like myself. And then you have, your more moderate establishment members or, candidates. And so there is kind of a divergence of ideology there. And when you have that, you get people that have different agendas that are voting on different things. And one thing, to your point, is the left, on the other hand, they whether they come in, whether they campaign or whether they personally have different beliefs or principles, they all vote in lockstep. So they're much better, in my opinion, at moving the ball forward on their side. And I believe it's been very destructive to this country, but to your point, they are better at doing that than we are.
Why do you think that's the case? Why? I mean, yes, the lockstep I think is there for sure, but why do you think they're on that left side of the aisle? It's just more offense than the right side of the aisle. I don't understand it. I don't get it. Maybe it's this whole concept of, playing fair or playing by the rules or trying to be, take the higher ground that makes people maybe even a little too soft.
Yeah, well, I could be wrong here, but if I had to take a shot at it, I would say that the ultimate goal on that side of the aisle, it's not principle, it's not policy, it's power. And when your goal is power and your leaders, that's what the goal of the leaders, have, it's easier to put aside, petty squabbles or differences of opinions and say, hey, look, this is the best chance that we have to stay in power. So this is what we're going to do. Now, if you're on the, if you belong to a party that tries to vote principle and it's not about staying in power, or it is less often because that happens on both sides of the aisle. But I think that's why you see on the left, they do a better job at voting in lockstep because it's about power. And I mean, you can look at some of the positions that the leadership on the left has taken in the past and where they're at policy wise, now. A lot of this stuff that's fueling the Democratic Party right now it's radical ideologies, right? You've got socialism in there, you've got communism in there, Marxism. And I know for maybe even many of your viewers are like, Eli, what are you talking about? That sounds extravagant. It sounds like you're trying to be, like you're trying to be, like you're exaggerating. And I'm not at all. Matter of fact, you can look at the last couple presidential elections. Bernie Sanders is an avowed socialist. I mean, that's not even arguable. Okay. And you can argue that he's come in, within the top four of the last two presidential cycles. Okay. Most of these, like if you go back 20 years and look at Joe Biden's position on socialism, Nancy Pelosi's position on socialism, Chuck Schumer's position on socialism, they would have all disavowed it, decades ago. And they would have disavowed a lot of the stuff that they're now promoting decades ago. But to stay in power because they feel that's where the winds of, power are shifting, they'll take a different contradictory position now, because it's not about issue or principle. It's about staying in power. And that's why I would argue they do a better job, because they're motivated by something completely different than we are.
So then is any, I don't even know. Let me take that in a different direction. If you say that they're doing a better job at pushing their agenda forward because their motive is different, which is power, like you're saying, over principle, like how
Right.
do you take some of the same ability to fight and win, frankly, and push forward the correct motive of principle and truly caring about the American people and freedom and liberty and these sorts of things? Like where's the line, if you will?
Well, I think for us, what we do is we lead by example, right? I'm a guy that never wanted to be in politics. I was in special forces, and then I went into the business world, but I recognized what was going on, and all I can do is lead by principle and try and come on, whatever show it is, and just be transparent and authentic. What God, I can't.
Yeah, authentic. Yeah, authentic.
Authentic. My brain wasn't connecting there, but yeah, I mean that's all that's really all I can do. And then take the skills and from entrepreneurship and special forces, where you learn that you're nothing by yourself and you got to build a team around you, and then try and start building that team on the political side of the aisle, and start building that team and that culture within my family first, and then my community outside of that, and help people wake up to the fact that if we don't pull our heads out as Americans, we're going to lose this damn country. And and I know not everybody believes that. I know there's a lot of people out there that think this is the United States of America and it's just going to go on forever, but I personally believe that just like most empires have collapsed around the 250-year, 300-year mark, even that's very possible in the United States of America, because even this great system can only endure so much corruption, debt, greed, stupidity, foolishness, and wickedness. And so for me, it comes down to, taking a big problem and trying to make it small and asking, okay, Ryan, what can I do? What can I do? And I think when you get enough people, hey, Ryan, you might have way better skills at something than I do. And I'm not going to try and be like you. I'm going to try and be the best me I'm going to try and take the skills, talents, and abilities that God gave me and try and, put my shoulder to the wheel with those and see if I can make an impact with what I've been given. I'm not going to try and be like Ryan, because I know you've been given skills that I haven't been, but every single one of us has to do that. And like courage breeds courage, activism, I think, breeds activism. And so that's what I'm trying to do in my small little way, is just encourage others and set the example.
What is a guy who, even like myself, I'm not interested in politics myself. And I know there's plenty of guys who are listening in that feel the same way.
Right.
What do you suggest with guys like those? I mean, obviously, yeah, vote, try to share a message, but are there other things that these men can and should be doing to help reclaim this country and keep it on the right track, or get it back on the right track and then keep it there?
Yeah, well, first I'd start by saying, hey, you may not be interested in politics or the nature of it, but you're probably interested in how much you pay at the gas pump, how much you're
definitely
paying for groceries, how much you're paying for real estate, whether or not your kids go to school and are judged on the content of their character and not the color of their skin or their gender, whether they're being taught some radical ideology in school, etc. So, you guys might not be, it might not be, politics might not do it for you, but what I'm talking about is, one of the reasons we're in this spot is because guys who are smart, capable, and talented haven't been interested, and they've been checked out. And here's the deal: when you have a country that's of, by, and for the people, if those people are checked out, that creates a power vacuum, and that power vacuum is filled with something. And you're seeing what it's filled with right now, and it's not healthy. And that's what creates a lot of the chaos that you see. And so, maybe I'll pitch it to you that way and say, hey, you might not like the, watching, PBS or watching people, watching, the nightly news. Half the time I don't even like it. All I'm saying is that if you have a country that's of, by, and for the people, and those people who I would consider the sheepdogs and the guys that know better, and the guys that, love their families, love community, love the country, are checked out, what fills that vacuum? And you're seeing it right now.
Yeah. And so yes, 100% agree. But again, you're not going to get everybody in politics, but there are people who like I've heard people say, I'm not interested in politics, but politics is certainly interested in you. Right.
Absolutely. And it affects your life. And it's one of many verticals that affects your life, but I do think it's an important one. And it's often a pretty nasty one. And I think that's another reason that, people, I think as human beings, we avoid conflict. We don't like conflict. In many ways, I'm the same way, but I understand what comes on the backside, or what the byproduct of poor politics and poor policy is, and it affects our lives. And so if that's where the fight is, that's where I'm headed.
Yeah, the one thing I've had issue with is I listen to the political pundits and the talking heads from time to time, and I realize I need to turn some of that off, because I tend to become very cynical of what's going on, and I think there is a lot to be cynical about.
Yeah.
But also I think it begins to taint or erode or undermine what positive or what good could actually be done from being involved, and it's like all or nothing, because I get so cynical. I'm like, oh man, I got to turn the news off. And you hear that all the time. It's like, just turn the TV off, just turn the podcast off, and just focus on your life. And I understand the sentiment, but it's not a good way to engage, especially because we are experiencing the real world ramifications of policy that's not conducive to our best interests.
No, I hear you. I've even gone through phases myself where, I'll turn it off and check out for a while. And I know I have a lot of friends that have done the same thing, and I totally understand why. It doesn't make you feel good. It does make you cynical. And, it is tough to stay engaged, in a fight. And I remember, some of my deployments overseas where, we'd be there for 6 months. And I remember just how frustrated you would get sometimes, with what was going on, the op tempo, whether or not we felt like we were successful or not, some of the politics that, even came into warfare, and guys just getting burned out at a certain point in the deployment. You could tell when they did. And so I've seen it not only in culture, but I've seen it in warfare as well. And I think it is important to have that's why I think it's important to stay balanced in your life, to where it's not, 24/7 politics, Fox News, CNN, whatever your flavor is, but making sure that you're living a balanced life, trying to, take time to, get a workout in. For me, my faith is really important to me. Trying to make sure that I get that in as well. And then, get family time in as well. And, some time with my friends, and, just live a balanced life, but don't neglect it. I mean, if you neglect it, there will come a day, maybe 10 years from now, 20 years from now, where don't be surprised when we're dealing with some of the same issues that many of the other, empires around the globe have, eroded to. Or don't be surprised when we're the next Venezuela and you're living under a socialist dictator, where you no longer get to say what you want to say. You can no longer afford, that lifestyle that you have, because you were checked out. And that's why, it's interesting, that's why when this country was being founded, a reporter actually asked, I think it was Benjamin Franklin, hey, while they were, involved in the formation of our, our Constitution and some of our founding documents, a reporter asked him, hey, what kind of a government do you have for us? And he said, a republic, if you can keep it.
Right.
Those are the key words, if you can keep it. Why do you think he said that, Ryan? What do
Well,
you
I
think
just think it's so fragile. It's so delicate, right? I mean, it
Yeah,
could crumble at the slightest.
yeah. He knew history. He knew how unique this system was, and he also understood mankind and our and how complacent and passive we get a lot of the time, And so I think it's important to understand that, it's like, yeah, we have been blessed here. We have been very fortunate to live here, but the question is, are we going to keep it, or are we going to let it fade into oblivion? So that's why I'm doing this, man. And it is what it is, but I don't regret it, even though I don't like it that much. I don't regret it because I think it's an important mission.
What's your take on where you're seeing it now, maybe even from a different perspective, especially if you do get elected, is what's your perspective on how the military has changed relative to, because you're a former Navy SEAL, you spent a lot of times in the military. And so being in the military versus seeing it now, what's your perspective about how that's changed for better or worse?
Yeah, I think I'm disappointed to see where the military's at right now. I think that, like many of our institutions, it's becoming a social experiment, if you will. And I think many of the leaders that we have in the military have been selected and promoted, not because they're the best military or minds that we have, or the most strategic warfare minds that we have, but because they're willing to play ball and do what they're told. And I think it's when you see a lot of the stuff, you hear General Milley talking to Congress, about some of the culture problems that the military has, and he talks about, hey, he wants to get in touch with his or he wants to learn more about his white rage, or whatever it is. It's just I'm thinking to myself, what the hell's going on? What does this have to do with you leading the baddest fighting force ever assembled? And when I see a lot of this stuff going on, it really concerns me, because I know that that's not what our military is for. I know it doesn't help the effectiveness of our military. And I also understand how dangerous this world is. I've seen it firsthand, how many adversaries that we have out there that would just love to knock the United States, off of our position in the world, and would love to even just destroy the United States. And so I think it's very dangerous when you take something that's not supposed to be a social experiment, and start to influence it with that type of destructive ideology.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely see how it's deviated. Do you think that with the route of our military leaders, a question I keep asking myself, not just with the military, but even our presidency, is this complete and utter ignorance, or is this an intentional undermining? Like, what is the play here? Like in the military, is what is the ultimate play? Is it to undermine and erode this nation and our fighting force? Like, how does that serve anybody? I think about that even with student loan payments, or student loan forgiveness. It's like, what's the play? Is it just power, or does somebody actually believe that this is going to be better for everybody?
I think it's a combination of the two. I think there is a lot of ignorance involved, but I also do think that many of the people that have worked their way into positions of authority and power don't want to see, the same United States. I think they want to change it. I don't think that they want to see, a dominant United States. I don't think they want to see the people of this country have a constitution or a Bill of Rights that protects our unalienable or God-given rights. And one of the reasons I believe that is because many of them have complained about it publicly. And I don't think, and when I was talking about we have a guy who's an avowed socialist coming in the top 4 the last 2 elections. Socialism is not compatible with our Constitution and our Bill of Rights. It just isn't. They don't. You can't put the two together. One has got to give. And so I personally believe that there has been an attempt to destroy this country from within. And you might be saying, Eli, what are you talking about? That sounds crazy. Well, stay with me for a second. For your listeners out there, go Google Yuri Bezmenov. Have you seen Yuri Bezmenov's videos, Ryan?
No, I haven't.
Yuri Bezmenov was a KGB defector. And he was given interviews. He was a high-ranking officer in the KGB, and he was given interviews, I think back as early as the late 80s, early 90s, I believe. And he talked about how the KGB didn't spend a lot of their money on, the sexy James Bond type espionage. They spent he said maybe 15% of our budget went into that type of espionage, field craft, that type of stuff. He said the majority of our budget in the KGB went towards something called ideological subversion and trying to destroy the West. And if you go watch Yuri Bezmenov's videos, this KGB defector, he goes through what ideological subversion is and the steps. He actually goes through the steps and how long each one is supposed to take in embedding communists into every major institution that we have in the media, academia, in Hollywood, etc., and how they want to alter the ideologies that we have here, and to destroy the West. That's the goal, to destroy the United States. And don't take my word for it, guys. Go listen to Yuri Bezmenov talk about ideological subversion, the steps. But I do believe it's intentional. I don't believe anybody's, I don't believe most people are really as stupid as some of the things that you see going on here. Like, for instance, Ryan, let's be honest, man. We're starting to have arguments about whether or not men can have babies. That's how stupid things are getting in our culture.
Right.
And look, hey, man, maybe that's insulting to some people. Maybe some people believe that, men can have babies. I'm honestly not trying to, insult you per se, but come on. That's how far our culture has gone, where we're taking the most black and white issues, in my opinion, and we are inserting complete confusion. And I've heard the saying before, when it comes to the radical left, the issue is never the issue. The issue is always revolution. And what does that really mean? What they want to do is they want to try and destroy the institution. They want to try and destroy the framework that makes the West and makes our culture what our culture is. And if they can do that, then they can rebuild it into what they always wanted. Think about it like, there's a lot of guys that, probably watch your show that are in construction. Sometimes if you want to build, if you want to build a house, but a house is already there, sometimes you'll do a renovation, but sometimes you'll just knock the whole thing down because it's just quicker and easier to do it. And I think that's what they're actually trying to do. I think they're trying to destroy it so they can bring in a more totalitarian, overreaching, controlling government, like many of them have always wanted. And that's what I feel like is on the line. And that's why, as a dad and somebody who feels blessed to have grown up here and doesn't want to see other, I don't even want to see the people that are my opposition or who completely disagree with me. I don't want to have to see them live through communism or socialism, or any of it. And I don't think a lot of them even know what that will bring, because they don't study history and it's not really taught in our schools anymore. And the left does a really good job of inserting some, virtuous sounding words into their agenda, like equity and equality. And it sounds great when you say it. It sounds great. It looks great on paper, but when you actually get into what they're actually trying to do, there might be equality. We're all going to be equally poor and equally oppressed if we get their way of life. But hold on, sorry, man. Let me try and get my light back on.
There it
Sorry.
goes.
This
The clapper.
the sensor light didn't see me moving, so it turned off. Sorry.
No problem.
But yeah.
When you say, I'm always not skeptical, but just aware of when people say this is what they want, this is what they want. Like who is they? I mean, you're talking about external, foreign nations, and I'm sure that there's probably some thought that comes from internal as well. But who is they that we're talking about here?
Well, that's why I mentioned the fact that Yuri Bezmenov was a KGB officer.
Right.
So the KGB worked for the Soviets, right? It's kind of like our, it's kind of like our CIA, if you will. Okay. And when I also say they, the Chinese are doing it. The Chinese are doing it too. There are foreign countries that hate the West. They hate the United States, and they're trying to destroy the United States. And it gets kind of confusing because at times we even have, trade deals with some of these folks. So we do work with them at times. But like if you listen to, some of their leaders speak, especially lately, the Chinese absolutely want to destroy the West. They want to destroy the United States. And, I think a lot of people are sleeping on it just because we're so prosperous, we're so free here, that we really don't pay attention to things like that. I mean, you see some of these PragerU videos, a lot of kids can't even tell you, the 50 states. They can't tell you, they can't tell you just basic geography here in the United States of America, or, any of our history, or, who our founding fathers were, anything like that. They most certainly can't tell you what, President Xi of China, what he said publicly about the U.S., or what the Ayatollahs in Iran think about the U.S., or, who the president of Russia is. And so it's just, I think going back to something you said earlier, I think a lot of it comes down to ignorance, and a lot of Westerners not really understanding geopolitics.
Well, I think you're right. I think also that we have a lot to lose because of our freedoms. We live in pretty prosperous times, relatively speaking. We have a lot of abundance. We do still have, believe it or not, a lot of freedoms that most of the world throughout human history has never enjoyed. And right. So I think there's a lot of people who are saying, at least subconsciously, hey, I don't want to rock the boat here because I've got a house, I've got a car, I've got a family, I've got a job, I have a somewhat meaningful life, I've got a little freedom to do what I want. So why would I rock the boat? And I think that people need to wake up to the reality that, yeah, we could go south very, very quickly. In fact, it seems like we have been to some degree.
I would agree. And that's my point. Is that so much freedom, so much wealth, so much opportunity creates passivity and complacency. That's exactly my point. And most of us, that's our nature when we're so blessed and we live in a nice house and we have a nice car and our kids are going to a great school and we get to take a couple of vacations every year or one vacation a year. And we feel like we're living this American dream. The natural tendency is to stay in that little bubble of, just what awesomeness or whatever you want to say. You don't want to rock the boat. You don't want to jeopardize that. Right. And I get it. I totally get it. All I'm saying is that times are changing. This country is changing. The ingredients are changing. And I think because a lot of us stay in that little bubble, we're missing what's going on around us. And because we stay in that little bubble and because we don't pay attention, we don't really see the writing on the wall. And we have this idea and this arrogance that the United States of America, nothing could ever happen here. Well, if you look throughout the history of the world and all the empires that have fallen, from the Greeks to the Romans, and on and on and on, I'm sure many of their people thought the exact same thing. But due to often stupidity, foolishness, complacency, etc., those empires fell as well. And that's that's what I'm fighting for, is to, and that, I'm a conservative. At the root word of conservative is the root word conserve. What does that really mean? I'm trying to conserve the ingredients that made this place great in the first place. And that was, our framework, our founding documents, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, limited government. That's what our founders wanted. But you wouldn't know that if you watch the news today, as the federal government is now, imposing, medical treatment on people that don't want these type of medical treatments, and saying, hey, you're going to lose your job if you don't take this drug, or whatever it is. And that's what bothers me. I want to see people be able to live their lives. And I realize that, sometimes I come on strong, and I have strong beliefs that I realize that not everybody does. And I think it's great that you and I can have different beliefs, and we can live in a country where we have different beliefs, and we live in a country where we can actually criticize those in power. But we have to understand how unique and special that is, because it's not like that around the world, in many places around the world. If I was to sit here on a podcast in many countries around the world and criticize the leader of my country, I'd probably be arrested within hours.
Yeah, sure.
I want to make sure that we continue to have the ability to do that, because we're Americans. And if we, like I said, if we the people aren't engaged, it creates a power vacuum, and that vacuum is always filled with something.
Yeah, agreed. Well, the other thing that I like about candidates like you and other candidates is, it seems to me there's more military members running for office, which I like, because they've actually been in the battle.
Yep.
And then there's also more business owners from my perspective. Maybe I'm off, but at least anecdotally, it seems like there's more business owners who are entering the political realm. And that's valuable, because I think the old guard is basically, hey, you're going to grow up in this. You're going to be groomed into politics by your parents or your grandparents, the family name. And then this is all you're going to do. You're going to go to an Ivy League college. You're going to become a lawyer, and then you're going to get into politics, and that's going to be your life for generations. So I like this new, more practical, like actually having to go out there and have a business or be in the military, or in your case, both.
Yeah. I can't speak to the business, how many new business owners are running in comparison to the past. But what I can tell you is, just to give you an idea, this last cycle, I think there were at least 8 or 9 Navy SEALs that ran for Congress. And let me tell you something, just because you're a Navy SEAL does not mean you're going to be a good congressman. Doesn't mean you're going to be a good leader. Doesn't mean you're going to be a good anything. It means that at one point in your life, you did a pretty cool job, and it took a lot to get there. But to your point, what I've noticed is a lot of people that never wanted to be in politics are recognizing the same conditions that I am, and seeing feel a sense of urgency to try and do something about it. And I tell people all the time that if at one point in your life you were willing to die for it, that's usually a pretty good start. Now we have a lot to learn. Those of us that didn't grow up in politics, I know I have a ton to learn. I know there's a ton I don't know. But to your point, I like to see people that haven't spent a career in politics, willing to run and represent regular people, because I think that, one, the longer you're in politics, the more likely you've been corrupted. But I don't think that's what our founders wanted. I think our founders wanted, regular people like, you and I, and just normal folks to go represent the constituents or the district, and then to come back after a couple of years and to return to, doing our job. I don't think that they necessarily wanted, career politicians leading this country, but, unfortunately in these bodies, we don't have something called term limits. And so the only way you can do anything about that as a politician, because I don't happen to believe that most people that have this power are going to vote for a bill or legislation that's going to kick them out of office. I think the only thing you can do is, in that case, is lead by example and to term limit yourself.
Yeah, I used to be a heavy proponent of term, like there has to be term limits. I'm not sure that perspective has changed, but I've
Right,
seen and heard different things, uh, especially having somewhat very limited access to seeing sneak behind the curtain a little bit with
right,
regards to how things get done. You have junior congressmen who it's going to be hard for them to get things done, to navigate the political waters. And so I see some of that need to have some of these senior type
yeah,
officials.
yeah,
But somebody also said, and I haven't thought too deeply on this, frankly, but somebody said, we do have term limit opportunities, and that's by voting. It's like,
right.
but that goes back to what you were saying earlier, is that we're so complacent. We just vote party line, or straight ticket, or we don't vote at all because we don't think it matters. And so we're not even exercising that opportunity to vote these people in and out of office as we deem necessary.
No, you're right. And it was interesting because when I started getting into politics, and I started thinking about, um, how many people I know who actually know who their congressman is. Most people don't even know who their congressman is, and it just goes to show. It goes to one more example of that complacency, and ignorance, and how good we have it here. That most of us feel like we don't even need to participate because it's just a foregone conclusion that we're always going to have this wealth and this opportunity and this prosperity. And I think it's a
Yeah.
dangerous way. I think it's a dangerous way of thinking. I I understand it, but I think uh I think it leads to pretty dangerous places.
Well, we know it does, right? I mean, you've been saying that historically, we know where this leads and we know where this goes if we can't get involved in a meaningful way. Well, are you still involved heavily with Bottle Breacher? Like, is that something that you're still involved with, or did you tell me a little bit
Yeah.
about that?
No, we actually sold the business, I think about 6 or
Okay.
7 months ago. So
Okay, that's what I
uh
thought.
yeah, and it was kind of bittersweet for me. Obviously it was our baby. We started it organically in a garage, and grew it, and that's always hard to part with something like that. But me and Jen both felt like that's the direction that we were supposed to head, and so we sold the business, and we're moving on, and we're wishing the new owners luck, and hope they're prosperous in what they do. And but at the same time, it reminds me of when I left the Navy, Ryan. I left it 13 years, and most people were like, Eli, what are you doing, man? Why don't you just stay for another 7, get your retirement? And I'm like, hey, um, you know, this is where I feel like God's calling me, and I don't feel, my heart's not in it anymore. And the moment my heart's not in something, man, I unless I need to stay for, something bigger than myself, like my family, for whatever reason, and if it's not a good spot, good time for me to make an adjustment or a move, I've always tried to listen and to not be afraid to take risk and take chance. And it's led me to some pretty cool places. And so even though people don't always understand it, and they think, sometimes I know people in my journey have thought I was a little nutty, especially when I got out of the Navy, and they're like, I was telling people, "Oh, I'm going to make bottle openers," and they're like, what? It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But yeah, so yeah, we're not really involved in that anymore, but it was a blessing, and I'm glad we got to experience it. And I'm glad I got to see how hard entrepreneurs work, and experience that for a decade. Because I mean, wow. I mean, it really makes me regardless of whether I walk into like somebody's fast food chain, or whether I walk into another small business. I know how hard it is now, and it makes me appreciate the risk that people take every day. That get up and say, hey, I'm going to work for myself, and I'm going to offer a product or a service, to the people of my community, or people of this nation. And it's just really cool. And I think it's a big part of what's made this country so awesome.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I believe in small business. I mean, I'm a small business owner myself. One point of contention I have, among others, with the government is this insistent need of trying to help people, like, or even small businesses is another one. It's like, well, I'm going to come in here and help these small businesses. Like, I think you're misunderstanding, not you personally, but I think
Yep.
there's a lot of misunderstanding about the role of government. Like, it's not the government's job to come in and like support a business. It's not the government's job to come in and make sure that everybody's okay. And that's a good way, I think, to get brownie points and to get voted in. But it's a very frustrating thing. I just look at it and think, no, the government's job is to make sure there's a level playing field and that everybody has the same opportunity. And then it's off to the races from there.
Right.
And not to come in and say, well, this business needs help and that business doesn't need help. It infuriates me.
Yeah, no, I get you. And you sound like a pretty solid conservative. But yeah, I mean, and that's kind of the road, the slow road towards socialism, right? Where business or the government starts to pick winners and losers. And I think a lot of us felt that way during COVID. For instance, my business was deemed non-essential. So we were shut down, for 30 days. And, but yet you go into some of these big chains and they surely, you go into a Walmart, it wasn't shut down, and so you had this, government involvement in, kind of picking winners and losers. But to your point, you're right. That's not the responsibility of government. And I talked about our founders and our framers wanted limited government. They wanted the government to stay out of your life. And, that's one of the things that I want to also see return to America and our culture is a more limited government. But that is not the direction that the left, wants to take us. And I'll go back to, the ideological subversion and trying to teach our kids from a young age in school that is the government's job. And if they can continue to promote that ideology and make sure that kids aren't taught what our government's actual role is in this culture in America, I think that we're going to continue to see the United States go towards more and more of a nanny state until it's full-blown socialism. And it's one of the things that I'm trying to stop by running.
This idea of ideological subversion is it's very interesting to me. I know when people hear it, it almost borders conspiracy theory stuff. Yep. I think this is when a lot of people get lost in it. They're like, no, I'm done.
It's true. It's true.
So I'm going to have to go research a little bit for myself on that. But I am curious. Let's just assume that this is the case, and it sounds like it is. But how do we then reclaim these institutions? I think of academia. I think about the medical community, obviously the government, even media. How do we begin to reclaim or at least interject into some of these compromised institutions that are dictating and shaping much of society and culture today?
Yeah, well, you can sum it up with one word, and the word has some negative connotation to it, but it's really activism. I talk activism. When we think of activism, we think of Antifa rioters,
right.
Screaming and pulling their hair out and, in Portland or something like that. But activism is really just taking action. And I talked about it a second ago, and my skills, talents, abilities aren't yours, but every single one of us needs to look in the mirror and say, okay, what skills, talents, and abilities do I have, and how can I use them to be a part of, being the change that I want to see. And that's how we do it, because we really are the silent majority in this country, whether you're looking at whether you are a registered Republican, whether you're a Democrat, or whether you're an independent. I think most of us, a lot of us want to be left alone. A lot of us want to continue to live the American dream. And a lot of us want to be able to be prosperous. I know a lot of Democrats that don't like, seeing, some of the things that are going on within that party. And I even know Republicans that aren't happy about some of the things that are going on in the Republican Party. But at the end of the day, to answer your question, it's activism. Each and every one of us has to, one, realize that we have a system that's of, by, and for the people, right? Like I keep saying, I keep hammering it. But if we're not engaged, and if you're complacent, and if you're more focused on your fast food and what's on Netflix tonight, and you don't engage in this culture, it does create a power vacuum that is often, throughout the course of humanity and history, filled by dictatorships, oppression, the individual with the most powerful, or with the most power, the strongest, and often it doesn't usually lead to a place that's prosperous and abounds in freedom. And so that's my call to the people that are watching your show, whether I ever become a congressman or not, Ryan. That's what it's going to take, is people getting off their butts and realizing, hey, I may not want to run for Congress, or I might not want to start a podcast like Ryan, but I can go down and I can be a PC committee member, or PC committeeman, or I can be a poll watcher and go make sure that, when we're having elections here, that there's no shady business going on. Like every single one of us can do something. And I think that's the type of education and messaging that we've got to promote.
That's awesome. Yeah, I really appreciate that perspective. Well, Eli, thanks for joining me today. Tell the guys how to connect with you, learn more about what you're doing in your platform, of course, and your message, and we'll give you that opportunity.
Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate it, man. So yeah, if you guys want to go check our website out, it's eli4arizona.com. Eli Crane CEO on social media, and Eli Crane for Congress on social media as well. So if you guys want to go look us up, please do it. But Ryan, thanks for the opportunity, man. It's been an honor.
You bet. Thank you. Good luck with everything, and keep up the good fight. Appreciate it, man.
Thanks, brother.